Chapter 3. Falling Short. Catching a moment and gathering his thoughts, the man leaned against the cold, unyielding concrete wall, his fingers trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. Beyond the steel gates he had just closed, the clamor of the sick outside faded to a distant murmur. Sweat dripped down his brow, mingling with the grit of dust and fear. He closed his eyes briefly, trying to steady his shaking hands and calm the frantic beat of his pulse. A new weight of exhaustion settled over him like a heavy blanket, reminding him of the perilous escape he had just made. Outside the gates of Piccadilly Safe Zone, the low, guttural moans of the sick formed a haunting chorus. A sense of isolation washed over him, amplified by the eerie stillness of the once bustling safe zone. The absence of human activity was unnerving, punctuated only by the occasional rustling of paper or creaking of metal in the wind. Each sound seemed magnified, echoing off the tall concrete walls like a whisper of impending danger. Leaning back against the wall, he closed his eyes again, trying to block out the images of the sick. Gaunt faces twisted in agony, hands reaching out in desperation. He shook his head, willing the memories to fade. Now was not the time to dwell on what he had witnessed, but to focus on what might be waiting for him ahead. It was highly unlikely that the safe zone was still safe. His gaze wandered. Amidst the desolation, his eyes were drawn upward to the large radio antenna perched high atop the main building. Its slender form stood defiant against the cloudy blue sky. As he rested, the man couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope stir within him at the sight. Perhaps, here amid the ruins, lay the key to his next move, a way to connect with others and find answers. With renewed determination, the man pushed himself off the concrete wall and set off toward the main building. His steps were measured and cautious. The air was thick with the weight of silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of debris carried by the wind and the muted pats of careful steps. As he approached the main building, he stopped and turned his gaze to a single-story, glass-fronted structure nearby. Its panes now shattered, shards of glass carpeting the ground. The signs of struggle were evident. Bullet holes pocked the exterior, and small, dark patches of dried blood marred the pavement. He then took his pack off again slowly and lowered it to the ground. Reaching into his pack, he pulled out a pistol, a Glock 17. With practiced ease, he checked the magazine, ensuring it was fully loaded, then chambered a round with a smooth, decisive motion. The metallic click of the gun cocking cut through the quiet. This was a visible display of the man's obvious experience with firearms. Satisfied, he holstered the weapon at his side and turned his focus back to the path ahead. The main building loomed larger now, its radio antenna stretching skyward and almost fully obscured by the building. The man scanned the building's exterior, eyes searching for an entry point. Most of the ground floor was taken up by a row of restaurants, some of which had been repurposed as canteens for the safe zone. Signs of adaptation were everywhere: repositioned tables, queuing points, and hastily erected partitions. The sight was a grim reminder of the struggle for survival that had once taken place here. As he circled the perimeter of the building for any possible entry, amidst the overgrowth and debris, he spotted a fire exit door slightly ajar. Its darkness was foreboding, but it offered a way in. He unholstered his pistol, holding it at the ready. Taking a deep breath, he approached the door, prepared for whatever may lay inside. With a sudden halt, standing still for a moment, he reholstered his pistol and removed his respirator, feeling the cool air against his skin. He massaged the pressure marks on his face, the brief moment of relief soothing the ache. His fingers traced the indentations, taking a few deep breaths, followed by a resigned sigh. He replaced the respirator, securing it tightly. His hand moved to his pistol, unholstering it again, and holding it at the ready as he stepped into the darkness, his eyes beginning to adjust. Shadows slowly gave way to the contours of a stairwell, dimly illuminated by faint blooms of light from windows above. He hoped this stairwell led all the way to the roof. With his pistol still at the ready, he began his ascent, each step echoing softly in the confined space. Each step up the concrete stairs, deliberate and silent. He passed the first entry door, pausing briefly to peer through its narrow window. Inside, he saw the remnants of offices, now repurposed into cramped accommodation areas. He continued upward, repeating the process on each floor. The second floor was much the same, makeshift beds and scattered personal items. On the third floor, he observed tattered blankets hanging from cubicle walls, forming fragile privacy screens. The fourth floor marked the end of the stairwell. The man felt a twinge of disappointment as it didn't lead to the roof, only to what appeared to be an office area, almost untouched. He pushed the door open, pausing briefly at every tiny creak. His movements were steady, showing none of the tension in the air. He stepped into the office area, his eyes scanning the room. Scattered papers and abandoned desks came into view. He moved forward cautiously, his every step silent and deliberate. The man entered a larger area of the office, his eyes scanning the room quickly. At the far end, he spied a door with a sign that read, "Roof Access." Relief washed over him, and he walked on at a faster pace, eager to reach the roof. Suddenly, his heart sank as he heard a gasp from the right side of the room. He quickly turned his head, and his blood ran cold at the sight. In the far corner of the room, 3 sick people sat on the floor, their hollow eyes locked onto him. The remnants of a gruesome feast lay before them, the lifeless body of what was most likely another infected, savagely torn apart. The man swallowed hard, gripping his pistol tighter, his mind racing for the next move. "Help! Please help!" the female sick spoke, before shaking and jolting up off the floor, with the other 2 following, like puppets on strings, obeying the puppet master within them. He fired 3 shots in rapid succession. 2 fell instantly, their bodies crumpling lifelessly. The third, wounded but undeterred, lunged at him with a guttural moan of pain. Now instantly grappled, he was staring into wide, desperate, bloodshot eyes through the perspex of his mask. "Sorry, sorry, sorry," the sick man was blurting in distressed turmoil. The man staggered back, slamming into the wall. He grunted, using all his strength to push the sick person away. With a swift motion, he grabbed his bat and swung with all his might. The cracking impact was sickening, but necessary. He swung again, ensuring the threat was neutralized. The room fell silent except for his heavy breathing, the tension slowly ebbing away. The man could hear commotion throughout the building, screams and banging echoing in the corridors. The sound of running feet up the stairwell signaled the approach of the sick. Quickly, he pushed an office desk against the stairwell door, barricading it as best he could. Banging on the door shortly followed the desperate attempts of the sick to break through. Without wasting a moment, he sprinted to the roof access door. Relieved, he found the roof access door unlocked. He pushed through, stepping out onto an external walkway. He looked up, spotting a set of steps leading to the roof. His eyes scanned for anything to secure the door, but found nothing. The realization that he had no way to barricade it made his heart race again. He knew he had to move fast, hoping the barrier he left behind would hold long enough. He sprinted up the stairs to the rooftop, his breath heavy inside the gas mask. Reaching the top, he saw what looked to be a portable military comms hut with the towering antenna next to it. The rooftop was eerily empty, with no sick in sight. Without wasting a moment, he made his way to the entrance of the comms hut. He approached the ajar door, his pistol raised and steady. With practiced precision, he nudged the door open and stepped inside, eyes scanning every corner. Moving cautiously, he checked each angle, his grip firm and sure. The hut was clear, the silence almost deafening. He lowered his pistol slightly, allowing himself a brief moment of relief. The room was bare, containing only a transceiver on a small table, a few chairs, and a filing cabinet against the wall. Spinning around, he swiftly closed the door behind him and latched it. His movements were quick and decisive, driven by the need for security. The solid click of the latch was a small comfort after all that had just unfolded. Panic struck him as he noticed the black, blurred spatters on his visor, remnants of his close encounter with the sick. He dropped his pack to the floor, quickly reaching into another large pocket and pulling out a plastic bag. Walking over to a corner of the room, he stripped off all his clothes, throwing them into another corner. With a bottle of ethanol sanitizer from the bag, he poured a generous amount into his hands, rubbing it in up to his forearms. Carefully, he removed his mask, avoiding touching his face, and dropped it to the floor. He then pulled out a can of aerosol sanitizer, preparing to disinfect further. Taking a deep breath and holding it, he began to spray all over and around himself until a thick mist surrounded him. The can was nearly emptied as the mist began to settle. After nearly 30 seconds, he gasped and seemed to intentionally breathe in one lung full of the mist, waiting for around another 30 seconds for the mist to dissipate. With bloodshot eyes from the spray, he walked over to his backpack and emptied the rest of the can on it and his boots. He unzipped it and pulled out a fresh set of clothes. He dressed swiftly, starting with his trousers, pulling them up and fastening them securely. Next, he slipped on a shirt, feeling the clean fabric against his skin. The comfort of the clothes was a welcome change after the cold of standing naked. He looked around the hut, taking in his surroundings. The sparse room offered little in the way of clues or comfort, but he knew he had to stay focused and find anything that could help him on his journey and maybe understand what happened here. The man walked over to the radio station, his eyes scanning the equipment for any sign of functionality. As he approached, something caught his attention in his peripheral vision. He stopped abruptly and turned his head slightly. In a small room adjacent to where he stood, he saw the lifeless body of a soldier. The man took a step closer, peering into the small room. The soldier's body lay crumpled on the floor, his uniform torn and bloodied. Amidst his pale, darkening and rotting skin, mostly eaten, bruised with deep gashes, his face and hands were mutilated beyond recognition, but there were no signs of RCB infection. The soldier must have died in the initial outbreak in the safe zone. Beside the soldier, a shotgun lay on the floor, a few spent cartridges scattered nearby. The man turned away from the horrific scene, heading back to the radio station. He sat down carefully, every muscle tense with caution. His eyes drifted to the window, scanning the view of the rooftop entrance where he had ascended. He watched for any signs of movement, ensuring he wasn't being pursued. The stillness outside offered a small comfort, but he remained alert and vigilant all the while. He spun towards the radio station, fiddling with the dial switches this way and that. It remained silent and dead. Frustrated, he looked out at the solar array. Why isn't the building getting power? He silently grunted to himself, staring out the window at the solar panel array on the roof. Annoyed by the lack of progress, he turned to the scattered paperwork, hoping to find anything useful. The man rummaged through the stacks of paperwork, his fingers brushing aside faded memos and dusty reports. Eventually, he found a folder labeled Radio Log. Opening it up, he saw the neat typed entries beginning with the start date, May 2028. The first entry recorded the successful establishment of the Piccadilly Gardens safe zone and noted the admission of priority citizens. He began scanning through the entries on the first few pages. Safe zones up and down the country had checked in regularly. The only exception was London, which had never checked in. He lingered on this fact. The absence of the capital's updates were a stark reminder of just how swiftly devastating the RCB pandemic was in the early days. After slowly raising his head with a distant expression, processing the information for a moment, he returned his focus to the book, flipping through the pages to see what other information they might hold. The man meticulously scanned the entries, observing the gradual cessation of communication from various safe zones. By February 2031, most zones had gone silent. Only a few in the south, like Anglesey and Norwich, still checked in, along with mainly northern ones such as Carlisle, York, and Newcastle. These updates, dating back to 6 months ago, hinted at the possibility that not all was lost. As he flicked through the pages of the last entries, his heart nearly stopped when he saw the word Scarborough. His pulse quickened, eyes widening in a mix of excitement and dread. Scarborough was mentioned. The man leaned in to read the entry carefully. Date, February 15th, 2031. From Scarborough Safe Zone, Class C. Report, severe famine reported over the past 6 months. Significant mortality due to dysentery and other unidentified illnesses. Current status, recovering, with a decrease in reported illnesses. Supplies nearly exhausted. Rationing implemented 3 months ago. Scarborough Safe Zone has established fishing, hunting, and foraging teams to sustain the population. Immediate assistance required to support ongoing efforts and prevent further loss of life. He read the entry twice, feeling a mixture of hope and anxiety, with a hint of nausea rising in his throat. With newfound inspiration and purpose, the man stood and paused for a moment, letting the gravity of the situation settle in. As he surveyed the room, his eyes caught sight of a loose sheet on the table, appearing hastily written. Curiosity piqued, he stepped closer and picked it up. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a log of outgoing SOS calls, desperate attempts to reach other safe zones. The man scanned the hastily written log, the entries chronicling the descent into chaos over 3 harrowing days. The first entry was dated February 27th, Day 1. Outbreak detected within the safe zone, believed to be spread by rodents or birds carrying RCB. Initial infected, John S., nurse, Susan L., teacher, and Mark R., engineer. Quarantined and dispatched quickly. No further signs of infection. Situation under control, but vigilance required. The second entry, written with a more frantic hand, followed with increasing urgency. Day 2. 1/3 of the population showing symptoms. Infection spreading rapidly. Quarantine measures failing. Entire families barricaded in their rooms, pleading for help. Medical staff overwhelmed. Panic setting in. Situation critical. The final entry, desperate, sent a chill down his spine. Day 3. Complete chaos. Safe zone overrun. Do not come to Piccadilly Safe Zone. We cannot contain the infection. Last transmission before evacuation attempt. God help us all. The man felt the weight of the words, each entry painting a vivid picture of the horror that had unfolded. The urgency and desperation were palpable, showing how quickly things had fallen apart. He snapped out of his trance, the gravity of the log entries lingering in his mind. He walked back to the adjacent room, eyes settling on the mutilated corpse of the soldier. Steeling himself, he knelt beside the body and noticed the shotgun, a Benelli M4. Recognizing the model, he picked it up and checked it over, the mechanisms clicking and snapping with precision. Satisfied it was in working order, he loaded the 5 remaining cartridges from the soldier's pouch. Next, he noticed a full magazine of 9mm bullets. He removed the bullets, refilling his own magazine and stowing the rest in his pack, discarding the incompatible magazine. He rose off the floor and took in his surroundings. Noticing the decontamination cupboard, he deduced that the soldier, whose body he had inspected, must have come into close contact with the sick. Desperation had driven him here, chased into this final refuge as his options dwindled. He approached the locker, moving it aside to pry it open. Inside, he found a Tyvek coverall, a half-empty can of sanitizer, a bottle of ethanol liquid sanitizer, a box of latex gloves, and a disposable face shield and mask. He first slipped on a pair of latex gloves, then put on the coverall. Carefully, he poured the liquid sanitizer onto a cloth and walked over to his respirator. Methodically, he wiped it down, paying close attention to every crevice. Using a fresh cloth, he ensured it was completely clean and dry. Satisfied with his work, he strapped the respirator back on. Heaving up and on his backpack, with his shotgun held at his side, he turned to look out of the window, intensely scanning the rooftop and the area ahead for any sign of movement. After a few moments, he saw that there was still no indication of the sick having followed him up. Thinking to himself, "I need to get out of this mess before planning my route. First things first." He turned away from the window. He approached the hut's door, unlatched it, and stepped out. With a final check to ensure the rooftop was clear, he moved purposefully toward the stairwell, his mind focused on the immediate uncertain task of making his way down and out of the building.